today we're going to be talking about should you buy or rent real estate, because this, I believe, is our audience that we're talking to today is going to be individuals that are in university, college, maybe first-time home buyers, maybe someone who's just thinking of getting into whether they should buy real estate or not. I'm going to talk a lot about my own experience because, I'm only 32 as well, and I actually bought my first property when I was 19 years old. Actually, I bought it when I was 18 as a pre-sale, so that when I was 19 legal age in BC, I was able to sign for it at completion. So that was my first kind of foray into real estate purchasing. And over time, I've bought, sold, renovated, house hacked, and done a lot of trading up basically to be to where I am now. But I didn't start there. I started where I was renting my own places, and I was house hacking. So basically house hacking. House hacking is where you take either a room or part of the home and rent it out to somebody else to kind of offset the costs of your mortgage. So what we're talking about today is housing unaffordability. Right now, nearly 70% of millennials, according to a 2019 study, found that about 35% less wealth than would have been predicted for the earlier generations at the same ages. 30% or more of your income typically is going towards renting. So that essentially, you're considered rent burdened. And what we see a lot on social media right now as well are posts regarding like, hey, I'm renting for $1,500 per month, but you won't give me a mortgage for $1,000 per month. How does that make sense? So, and what it comes down to really right now is the market is such little inventory, huge demand, prices have gone up crazy amounts. And so housing is just really unaffordable. When I started working my first time job, I was being paid $6 an hour, and this was back in like 2006, around there. And so that was getting paid $6.50 an hour, but housing prices was like $250,000 for a house. Now the same house in the same spot is $800,000. So there's a discrepancy in income versus housing prices in Kelowna especially. So how do you get yourself to a point where you're able to afford a house? So right now, there's a common misconception that buying is always better choice than renting, because a lot of people think that renting is just throwing money out the window. I'm one of those people that I feel like renting is throwing money out of the window. But in most cases, you have to start there. You need to start with renting a place first, because it's just not feasible to have the money right away to have the down payment to buy a place, especially in this market. So the actual cost of owning a home is much greater than just a mortgage payment. You also have property taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance to take into consideration. And those are a lot of times unexpected expenses that people don't plan for because they're so fixated on buying the house and affording the mortgage that they forget all the other costs associated. So for a lot of people, renting in the short term is actually going to be a lot more effective for your use of money, especially if you're utilizing other ways of investing to kind of offset the extra funds that you could have been putting into buying a property. So purely for cash flow purposes, renting is usually cheaper. Even though you don't get the tax benefits of owning, usually renting and investing elsewhere is the cheapest month to month out of pocket. But in terms of net cost over 7 years, so that's normally where we're looking at a 7 years time frame, the lease will cost you more than owning a home. Realizing the tax benefits of seeing appreciation in a property, paying down your loan are just some of the reasons to own versus rent. And what I view owning a home as is almost a forced savings plan. You could do your best to try and set up a $10 or $20 a month savings plan for your retirement, but most of us know how that goes. You have a tax-free savings account, you do your best to put money in there on a regular basis, but then life shows up. And all of a sudden, you need to fix your car, or you need to pay for university or courses, or you lost your job during COVID and now you need to dip into your savings to kind of float yourself for the next couple months until you get a new job. Most people are going to dip into that tax-free savings account, and that's going to reduce the balance. And what we find is you get your up, down, up, down, up, down of savings, and in 10 years' time, you're nowhere closer to your goal. With a mortgage, you're already kind of paying that rental amount, right? So when you're paying your mortgage, principal gets paid down on your mortgage. And over the years, you're forcing yourself to save without even technically kind of realizing it, because nothing's really changed in your habits. You're paying your monthly mortgage, which is essentially the same as rent, but you're paying down that principal. So you're at the end of your term, you've actually built up equity in your home, which you can then use to transfer and upgrade to another property if you wanted to. So renting versus owning calculator. There are lots of calculators online. This is a fairly straightforward calculator that you can use. So if we click on this, it's going to open up to a new window. This is a rent versus buy calculator for Canadians, 2021. So depending on what kind of province you live in, so we're in British Columbia, what city, what your monthly rent is, versus the home purchasing, interest rates, property value growth, this will tell you over a certain amount of years, and we usually like to use 7 years, because that's going to give you a better picture. But basically it'll tell you the results, whether buying is better for you for 3.17 years or longer. So in this area, if your monthly rent is that amount and your purchase price is this amount, if you plan to stay for basically 3 years or longer, buying is better for you. Otherwise, if you're going to be moving around and you're not going to stick in one spot for very long, and maybe you plan to move to another city within 1 or 2 or 3 years, then you're probably better off renting. Because keep in mind, there's purchase costs such as legal fees, property transfer tax, selling fees such as, again, legal costs, and also capital gains, realtor fees. So it doesn't make sense if you're planning to buy and then move within 2 years. The costs just don't make sense. You're better off to rent in that situation. But this calculator gives you a fairly good idea of whether or not you should rent versus buy. Then there's information down below with, more information about that. So a rent versus own calculator is a good way to kind of plan what, for your life situation, whether or not renting is better than owning. Because owning is not for everybody. It does tie you down to a specific place in your life that you're kind of having those obligations. If you are going to be buying, typically I recommend to buy something that allows you to have rentals. That way you could be the landlord and rent to somebody else and still have the flexibility to go and have a nomadic life and do your van life if you want to do that. So house hacking. This is what I talked about at the beginning. House hacking is a strategy that involves renting out portions of your primary residence to generate income that is used to offset the cost of your mortgage and other expenses associated with owning a home. Most millennials, I'm a millennial, believe that landlords are unfair, that they're gouging you, that they're greedy, and that they're making all this money off of you. The reality is you don't actually have to own a home to be the landlord. You could also sublet as a tenant to somebody else. Example 1, we're going to house hack without owning, and you are going to sublet or have roommates. This is one of the strategies that I did at the very beginning to help save up for my down payment and to offset the cost of buying a property in the future. And what this is, and I also did this even after I bought properties. After I sold my properties in Kelowna, I moved to Vancouver for a period of 3 years. I rented there. Well, I didn't just rent a place for myself and pay the whole thing. So what I did is I found an affordable rental, which was a basement suite, 2 bedrooms, $1,000 per month. It wasn't the nicest place in the world, but it had the extra bedroom. Now, I could have kept that as an office space or my own use, and I could have paid that $1,000 a month, no problem. But what I did instead is I found a roommate. I rented that room out for $700 a month. So my out-of-pocket expense for my living, because my utilities were included in that as well, was $300 a month. So with this strategy now, you would be able to pocket $700 a month that you would have normally been spending elsewhere, plus utilities, and put that aside to save up for a down payment. We're not talking about having money immediately within 1 year to be able to afford a mansion, right? We're talking about planning over time. Time is your friend, your ally right now. You're not 50 years old planning to buy your first home. And if you are, then these will still work for you as well, because you still also have time on your hands. But we're talking about thinking 7 years, 10 years, saving up for that down payment, right? You don't have to be doing it right away. So $700 savings, $800 savings, including utilities, every single month, because you've rented out that room. Now, that's not going to be for everybody. Some people don't like sharing space, but this is the strategies and the kind of things that you're going to have to give up or become accustomed to if you're wanting to have those goals. Those are things that I did to get to those points. That's because I was having a goal of buying a property. So example 2, if you already have the funds and you're able to, or maybe you have a bank of mom and dad, you can typically look at buying a property that has an in-law suite or a legal suite, or if you have the ability to, which would be amazing, buy a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex. Obviously those get more expensive as you go. Typically a little home with an in-law suite is going to be your best bet. Legal suite is best because then you don't get in trouble with the city for breaking any rental rules. But if you can, then you can buy a property and have that to offset your mortgage. That way you can afford a nicer property and have a tenant in there long term that pays the mortgage basically every single month. Not the full mortgage, obviously, but a portion. So this obviously is if you already have the money to afford buying a property. This first example is if you don't have the money yet and you're saving up for a down payment. So house hacking. Example 3, student rentals. And this can also be a combination of both 1 and 2. If you have the money to buy the property, then great. You can buy it and you can rent out all the rooms, or you can live in one room and rent out all the other rooms to students. I usually recommend for an investing strategy for real estate is buying property near universities, colleges, schools, hospitals, any place that is, even in a downturn economy like with COVID, is going to typically have a steady stream of renters that are going to want to move into your place. So for student rentals, I'll give you another life example. We had a home next to Okanagan College that we basically renovated very slightly, and we had 4 room rentals in there, and we rented them out to mainly students. And so this works really well because then you're maximizing the revenue that you can get for your space, because each room gets a little bit more than if you were renting the whole house to one family. Another thing that this works well is if you want to, and there's a little bit of risk where you're taking on the full rental amount, but if you want to, if you don't have the money to buy, this will really kind of expand and maximize the income you can have to save up for down payment, is rent out a whole house close to a university or close to a college. And what you do then is you are now the landlord of the unit, and you sublet, of course, get approval from your actual landlord for subletting, but you get roommates and you rent out those rooms. But instead of having just a 2-bedroom where you rent out 1 bedroom, you're now renting out 3 or 4 bedrooms at $800 per room. So you see how that can build up, right? So you live in one, and let's say the house rental is $3,000 a month, right? But you have 3 other bedrooms and you can get $800 per room extra. So now you have a whole house. Maybe you can even rent those rooms out for $1,000 a month, right? So you have $3,000, let's say, per month coming in from those room rentals. Your rent is free. You're living rent-free. Now you would essentially be able to take the $1,000 that you normally pay for your rent and save that for your down payment built up over time. So there's different ways of how to build it up. Now that's just the actual living expense of having a roof over your head with the savings. Getting your down payment, you can do a whole bunch of different things. So house hacking, rental if you don't have the money to buy a place yet, eating and drinking at home. I know this is a little bit more of a traditional thing for a lot of people because we have the day and age of I want everything now kind of mentality where, you know, you want that fast food right now. You want to go eat at the restaurant right now. You want to go get the drinks with your friends right now. The biggest way to save your money and is really to eat and drink at home. Prepare your meals ahead of time. Bring your lunch in your bag. I know it's not the cool thing to do, but this is how you're going to save a lot more money because you're thinking about the daily incremental costs that you have. Another big important thing is budgeting. I don't like budgeting. I don't think anybody really likes budgeting. I mean, there's probably some people that like budgeting. But budgeting for your daily expenses is going to be how you, again, save up every single day. Get a second or third job. When I left my high school, I had 5 jobs. I started my first business when I was 6, but when I was out of high school, I had 5 jobs. That was a combination of things I was doing on my own and like 2 or 3 jobs. So if you have the goal of wanting to purchase property and you really want that, you need to have the work ethic to get there. No one's really going to hand that to you unless, of course, your family's already rich. And in that case, good for you. That wasn't my case. That's not the case for most people. So for most people, having that third, second, whatever job that you need, or the side gig that you're building your own business until that income surpasses your primary job, then you can focus on that. But having that multiple streams of income is really going to help build up that down payment savings. If you have family, like we mentioned, then good, bank of mom and dad. That's helpful for some people. So they might even be able to just, you know, if they have a property, they might be able to get a home equity line of credit on their property to give you access to a down payment that you pay their interest on because they're not just giving you a handout, right? You cover that, but at least you now have the down payment. And then you can get into the market, build up that equity, and then when it appreciates, you pay them back when you sell, that kind of thing. But that will give you access to a down payment right away. There are government incentive programs, such as the first-time homebuyers tax credit, which I think will be for most people here who haven't bought, where you can basically be exempt from the property transfer tax when you purchase your first home. Or for example, if you're buying a second property later down the road, like you bought one, you sold it, and you're buying your next one. If it's a brand new property, the government also has incentives for brand new home property transfer tax exemptions as well. So there's always government programs that you can take a look at to help save costs. And time is going to be your friend. Over time, you build up those savings. It's not just day one, boom, you win the lottery and you can buy something. It's over time, and building those habits of savings is how you get your down payment. Now, there's a CMHC first-time home buyer program. Now, there used to be a couple of years ago a different program, and they've changed it and revamped it, and there's this new program. So on this link here, which is this link, it's an equity share program. So this is the first-time home buyer incentive. This is a new program to help new home buyers with basically an equity purchase agreement. And so I actually preferred the old program, which didn't have an equity share. But this one is what they have now through CMHC. And you can take a look a little bit more in depth with what this program offers. But if you're a first-time home buyer and you have 5% down, for example, or 10% down, then the government is going to help kind of match up to a certain amount of that down payment, either the 5 or the 10%, and they will take a 5 or 10% equity share of your home. So when you go to resell, let's say and the value increased $100,000, then they will have either a 5 or 10% equity share of the proceeds of the profits, plus their equity that they had originally that they put in. So, but this way you have help getting that down payment. And this only works for a CMHC insured mortgage. That way the banks are protected in case you default, and that's why this is only a 5 or 10% down payment program. So this is good for you if you've worked really hard and you've saved enough money for a 5 or 10%, and you can't really get to that 20%, and you are a first-time home buyer, then this is a good way to kind of bump up your equity so that your mortgage payments every month are less because you've gotten that extra 5 or 10% bump from the government that you're not having to mortgage. So that's a helpful program. You kind of have to make the decision whether or not that's going to be a good program for you. It might help you get your more affordable, but then if the markets go crazy and the property's value goes up a lot, then you're giving away a lot of equity to the government. And that's kind of why they changed their program to be like this, because they wanted a piece of the pie, because they know that historically values go up. So the government's not in this to lose money. They know that the values are going to go up over time, and they're going to hold on, and this way they get a piece of the pie without having too much risk. So how much can you afford? If you're looking to purchase a home, you really need to start planning, budgeting, and figuring out how much you can afford. Now, most people don't know this, but roughly the banks are only going to allow you to use roughly 35% of your monthly after-tax income to go towards qualifying for your mortgage. That's after you're taking into consideration debts, car loans, credit cards that are needed being paid off, student loans, all of those, whatever you have left over, and your monthly expenses, 35% of your monthly after-tax income is what you can use. So if you're making $2,000 a month, you don't actually get to use the $2,000 a month to qualify for your mortgage. Unfortunately, that would be amazing, but that's not how it works. You have basically, if that's what you're making per month, you have $700 after tax that you can use to qualify for your mortgage. That's a really hard-hitting reality for most people because when you actually sit down with a mortgage broker, you find out that you can't afford that $400,000 or $500,000 property. You can actually only afford a $250,000 property. So you're looking at very different inventory at that point. So it's important to know how much you can afford. So mortgage calculators, there's tons of them online. Rate Hub is one of my favorites because you can actually kind of customize the interest rates, the down payments and everything like that. And so you can customize this to play around, get an idea of what the rates are, and then that way you know what you can afford. Here's a screenshot of something I just pulled up based on the $700 if you're making $2,000 a month. Your mortgage amount that you can afford right now would be about $170,000. So you would need the down payment for the rest of whatever you want to buy. This is a 25-year amortization, and the interest rates roughly are about 2% right now that you can get on a 5-year fix, and that gives you about $727 per month is what your payment will be for that amount. Now, of course, if you have a higher income, then you can afford more. Another little kind of bump in the road as well is that the government has what's called a qualifying rate, a stress test. So even though your rate is 2% here that you're getting on your mortgage, you would need to qualify. I believe right now it just got bumped up on June 1st to 5.39 or 5.29, either way, roughly the same. you need to qualify at basically more than double what your interest rate is and to be able to get the mortgage at 2%. So even though you are going to get a mortgage for $170,000 at 2%, you need to be able to qualify for $170,000 at 5%. So that really cuts down your buying power even more. So this is why it's important to take a look and speak to a mortgage broker or your banker and find out what it is you actually can qualify for based on your current income. And so to give you an idea, in Kelowna, I pulled this morning, basically anything in Kelowna under $250,000 right now is this. This is it. Bachelor suites, and then there's one unit on Houghton, which that's kind of an offset but it's basically $229,000 to $250,000 gets you essentially a 300 square foot bachelor suite unit. So there's no house hacking on this. This is basically this would be you living here. Kelowna is a little bit more expensive than most places in majority of Canada right now. So it's a little tough here for someone getting started. Because this is now the price of what it used to be for a single family house when I was buying over 10 years ago. So there's definitely a discrepancy in how the market is right now. Kelowna is one of the most desirable places in the world internationally and starting to get more well known. So limited inventory, high demand equals high prices. But yeah, so with this example, because now we're looking at $250,000, right? So if you were looking to buy a place for $250,000, minus the $170,000 that you could potentially get for a mortgage, you need $80,000 down payment. So whether you have that money already or you need to save up for it, then the budgeting strategies that I talked about are important. The house hacking from renting is going to be important to build up that down payment. So house hack one room pays you about $800 a month. That's $9,600 per year that you could pocket and save. You could go on a holiday to Mexico, or you could go out to all restaurants every single night and go drink alcohol at the club with your friends every weekend and spend it all. Or you could be like other people like myself who, you have a subscription to Netflix and that's how you watch all your movies instead of going to the theater. You make your coffee at home so that you're not spending $5 a day at Starbucks. I mean, coffee at home, if you do it with your own coffee ground and whatnot, it's going to cost you maybe 25 cents per day, right? So you're saving about $5 per day if you're not buying your coffee at Starbucks. That's $1,800 basically in savings every year. Additional to your house hacking, additional to the not eating out, making your own food at home. All those little savings are going to equate to thousands of dollars every year in savings. So making that $80,000 down payment savings over time is doable, but you need to be able to save. Yeah, so costly mistakes to avoid. Get pre-approved. This was one of the things that I talked about briefly here with the interest rates and the qualifying rates. Speak to a mortgage broker. Don't waste your time, because time is valuable. It's expensive. You can't get your time back. So don't waste your time. Don't waste your real estate agent's time. Don't waste anybody's time. Go speak to your mortgage broker. Get a pre-approval based on how much they think you can afford. They might even just tell you, you don't have enough money saved up. There's no point to get a pre-approval because you need to build up your credit. You need to build up your down payment. But once you get to that point, get pre-approved. Find out exactly what you can afford, whether that's $500,000 or $300,000 or $1 million. Who knows? But get that pre-approval, because then you can actually go look at homes that are in your budget. Then you don't get discouraged by looking at the $2 million mansions and then you can only afford $300,000 condo. So get pre-approved. Pay 20% down if possible. Now, if you're doing the CMHC equity program, then you need 5 or 10%. You can't do this because you can't qualify for those programs if you're using those. But I would highly recommend that if at all possible, save 20% down payment. The reason for this is because if you have anything less than 20% down payment, you're going to get hit with a CMHC home insurance mortgage insurance fee. And that doesn't protect you, it protects the bank. You're paying essentially for an insurance on your mortgage in case you default to protect the bank. And it's not cheap. It's a tiered program depending on how much you're paying down. So if you have 5%, it's high. 10%, it's lower. 15%, it's lower. Not even at 19.9%, you're paying a CMHC fee. Even at 20%, but the bank covers the fee at 20%, right? So after 20%, you're not covering that cost, which is nice. Because, for example, one of our clients just bought a $400,000 condo. They paid 5% down. They paid $15,000, almost $20,000 as a CMHC fee, mortgage insurance, that gets built into the mortgage. So he had a down payment of about $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And so he was essentially paying majority of his down payment as a fee to cover the bank's butt if he defaulted. it doesn't make sense to me why you would work so hard for a down payment and then just give it away. So pay 20% down payment if you can, save those costs, and then that way you're essentially building equity faster in your mortgage. Have an inspection. In this market, it's kind of a crazy fast market, and there's not really a lot of time to do things like an inspection. In most cases, we would recommend having an inspection before writing an offer, but in this normal market, you would have time to have an inspection. And I would highly recommend you have an inspection because they'll be looking at all the main mechanicals, so the furnace, the air conditioning unit, the roof systems, the foundation, the plumbing, the electrical. Those can all become very expensive if they're not working properly. So I'm sure you've seen the horror stories of people buying homes and getting on the news because they didn't have an inspection and the house is falling apart. Don't be that person. Have an inspection and make sure that the house that you're buying before you buy it is in good condition and there's not going to be all these big maintenance issues that come up. So think house hacking. Again, if you like your private space and you don't want to have a roommate, then that's totally up to you, but that's your lifestyle that you've chosen. If you're wanting to focus on buying the home within 7 years or whatever, then house hacking is definitely a way to go. Put up with some people being a roommate for a period of time to help save up the money and offset that cost. Even myself, after I did all that house hacking and I was able to afford a place, I still built a house with a legal suite because I wanted to have that income that could offset the mortgage. It doesn't pay the whole thing, but it really helps with that mindset. I sleep better at night knowing that, if I lost my job or I made no more money, then at least I can potentially afford my mortgage payment because somebody else is helping pay it. So focus on saving. I know there's a lot of shiny things out there for us to be able to look at, and you want all those. And the Instagram posts from all those celebrities and whatnot, they're showing this amazing lifestyle of private jets, which a lot of it's fake anyway. They're just paying for photos. Then focus on saving. Don't get distracted with all of that. That's not everybody's life. So focus on saving, and that'll help you get to your goal. Budget for maintenance, because even if you are budgeting for the small paint jobs or the little repairs, eventually over time systems will fail, right? The furnace might give out. That's $3,000. The air conditioning might give out. That's $3,000. Now, that doesn't usually happen for 20, 30 years, but if you're buying an older place, that's something you need to budget for. Roof. Hot water tank goes out every 10 years, so that hot water tank is about $1,500 to replace. So budget for maintenance after you purchase the home. And then don't sell out of fear. This is a big one. We see a lot of this. So if you're going to make a calculated decision and you think the market might be dropping and you have a good profit you can make and you want to sell, that's great. Cash out, sell. But if you, let's say, just bought a place pre-COVID at UBCO, right? Because you were thinking, I'm going to go into university, I should invest there. And you bought a condo at that peak point right before COVID, or before even the foreign buyer's tax and spec tax and all that came in, and you bought that condo high up. And then all of a sudden, spec tax comes in, foreign buyer's tax comes in, and the market starts to drop, and prices for those condos are dropping because the foreign buyers are not buying for their kids anymore, for them to go to the school. And next thing you know, COVID hits, and then all of a sudden schools close, and no university students are going to school. The families aren't buying condos for their kids anymore instead of renting to go to school, so prices are dropping. You could have sold out of fear that the market would have just kept going, right? Because you're seeing the numbers drop. It's like stocks, just super, super fearful that it's going to just keep dropping to bottom. And you could have sold, and you would have lost money. My recommendation to my clients who bought at that point was hold. It's not a normal market. It's going to come back up. Historically, the trends are land becomes more expensive. There's less land, more people. So for any of the clients who held on using that recommendation, and now we're kind of at the tail end of COVID, hopefully, and schools opening up, the market for those units have just skyrocketed, surpassed what we were at before. And so for anybody who bought at that point, now they're in the positive. Now they're able to sell it for a profit if they want. But if you sold it out of fear, you would probably have lost some money. So speak with an accountant. Tax write-offs, home business, this is another thing as well that you can save money on. And so saving money with a home business, for example, if you were just doing some freelancing or elance or selling services for online marketing or doing some drawings, then you can write off a portion of your utilities. You can write off a portion of your interest on your mortgage or a portion of your rent. All of these things you can write off against your income as a tax-deductible expense. So speak to your accountant about this. But this is a really important thing that you can try to focus on, even if you're just doing something at home, right? A percentage of the use of your space that you're using for your business is a write-off of your personal expenses, your cell phone, your computer, your internet, all these things, and you can build that into your down payment savings. So that was a lot of information. So yeah, if anybody does want to reach out to me later, you're more than welcome to. JP Letnick. You can find me online by searching just JP Letnick or Letnick Estates Group. I'm happy to help with anybody if they have any questions.